husband of snake bite victim 49 years before she died. Ann Wortham, 75, died after she was bitten by a snake in Fremantle in Washington. She was bitten on South Beach, but it is unknown what kind of snake bit her. Mrs. Wortham came home and asked her husband to take her to hospital. Chris Wortham said he tied a shoelace around her leg to slow the bleeding. But it was too late. Mrs. Wortham died a short time later at a Perth hospital. She has been remembered as a bright, feisty and intelligent academic. A devastated husband who watched his wife die from a snake bite has revealed the desperate last moments of her life and remembered her as a bright, feisty and hugely intelligent woman who was deeply loved by her family. Chris Wortham, from Fremantle in Western Australia, said his brave wife, Anne, was calm and composed when she came home with the wound after walking at nearby South Beach on Perth's hottest August day in 17 years. He said blood was running down the back of her leg from where the deadly reptile had bit her when she calmly asked him to take her to hospital about 3:30 p.m. on Saturday. Mrs. Wortham not only leaves behind her husband but their 2 children, Miranda and Nicholas, and 4 grandchildren. Professor Wortham, who works at Western Australia's The University of Notre Dame, said he used a shoelace to try and slow down her blood circulation and the effects of the poison. He came to the door and I was snoozing, taking my afternoon rest. I heard her say, "Quick, get me to hospital. I've been bitten by a snake. I think it was a dugat or tiger snake," the 74-year-old told Daily Mail Australia. He grabbed a shoelace from one of the hiking boots and tied it above her ankle as a tourniquet. She said, "I think it may be too late, the venom may have traveled through by now. I was in shock horror, that is all, disbelief at first, until I saw the blood on the back of her leg." But the professor of theatre studies and English literature said he knew it was all over when his 75-year-old wife, who he had been married to for 49 years, slumped over on their way to the car. The academic dialed 000 and tried to revive her by performing CPR with instruction from an operator. But the exact location of where she had been bitten and confirmation of what kind of snake claimed her life is still unknown 5 days later, and Professor Wortham told Daily Mail Australia it would be weeks before a toxicology report came back. Just hours before her tragic death on Saturday, the pair had eaten lunch at their home out on the terrace. Following the meal, Mrs. Wortham, originally from Adelaide, went off for a walk to make the most of the warm weather. Professor Wortham said he usually accompanied her on walks, but she had gone later than usual and he had decided to have an afternoon nap. Being a frequent visitor of the beach, he added he had never seen a snake there. Mrs. Wortham not only leaves behind her husband but their 2 children, Miranda and Nicholas, and 4 grandchildren, Rachel, Olivia, Thomas and Eve, as well. They are devastated, all of them, and she was terribly close to her children and grandchildren who always loved being with her, Professor Wortham told Daily Mail Australia. She was known to them as Kenzie when our granddaughter Olivia couldn't say grandmother when she was younger. Mr. Wortham was born in South Africa, where he gained his first 3 degrees law honours, English and in Massachusetts at Rhodes University in Grahamstown. He then moved to the UK where he gained a PhD from the University of London with a study of 17th-century English poetry of the Civil War period. It was in the English capital that he met his future wife, where they were both working, before moving to Zimbabwe together for 10 years. The couple eventually settled in Perth. He used to joke, "I was married to an older woman, but it was only by half a year. I was born in November and she was born in June," the professor revealed. Mrs. Wortham had studied history and English at the University of Sydney, but her focus had been redirected to teaching migrants and refugees so she better equipped to transition into the Australian way of life. Mrs. Wortham's death from a snake bite comes at a time when they are not usually active in Western Australia. But the killer reptile has been brought out of its torpor by unseasonably hot weather. Saturday was the warmest August day in Fremantle for 17 years, reaching a top of 27 degrees. Dugat snakes are native to Western Australia and prefer sandy areas, while tiger snakes are found most commonly in the southern regions of the nation. Mrs. Wortham will be buried at 10 a.m. at St. George's Cathedral in Perth on Tuesday.